this is where we stopped before. And of course, in terms of these are types of behaviors, modes of communication, we're going to get into this more fully in a couple of lectures to the future. But animals communicate all kinds of different ways. Visual, oral, tactile, chemical, and then electrical. They also use echolocation, bats and moths. So moths are eaten by the bats, right? Well, moths can hear bats echolocating on them, and they can actually take evasive action. Also, moths actually communicate with those high-frequency signals with each other. You wouldn't expect that from a moth, but they're pretty sophisticated. In fact, they even have an ability, some moths have an ability to jam the echolocation of bats, just like you would expect in dog fights, jamming your radar and all that. Same thing. They invented it far before we ever even thought of it. So, pretty interesting. What? Yeah, they emit a frequency that interrupts the signal. So that's how we do it. We emit a frequency that interrupts the signal, same way. Have you guys all heard about the honeybee waggle dance, or maybe you don't know it? Honeybees are incredibly gifted at communicating where, let's say, a food source is or something else. And they actually do these dances to not only show how far away a food source is, but the orientation, and then in terms of altitude or elevation, how high it is. And they do, first of all, they find out a lot of it depending on the angle of the sun. So a round dance, down on the left there, indicates a food source within 80 to 100 meters. The waggle dance, its orientation and distance for greater than 100 meters. And then other workers, of course, follow that dance. And they do touching and displaying, and then they have an idea of where the food source is, and they fly off to it. This is kind of similar. As you know, ants and bees and wasps are all fairly closely related, and ants do some of the same sort of stuff. A lot of times, a worker will actually find a food source. They don't do a waggle dance. They go out and they actually grab another worker, take them to the food source, and then take them back. So, and then it's exponential after that. Each one takes another one, and soon there's a trail to the food source. Now, this is kind of interesting. Some people might consider a beehive or an ant colony kind of a supraorganism. And these supraorganisms kind of show what we would consider to be intelligent behavior. I mean, this is intelligent behavior, right? But if you looked at an individual's bee brain, they, I don't know if they're thinking about it or not, I doubt it. They're getting a cue to respond a certain way. And then they do that response a certain way, and then others follow it. I think individual bees or individual ants are akin to individual neurons. So we have this net in our brain. Individual neurons by themselves are not smart. They respond to electrical charges. If you get over a certain energy, the synapse is passed on to the next neuron. So by themselves, they just respond to what's going on in their environment, much like a bee does. And I actually think in this way that ant or bee colonies or wasp colonies, whatever they are almost akin to individual neurons in terms of each individual insect. I mean, that's just kind of my feeling. I don't know if it's really true. People have thought about it for a long time, but I don't know if anybody's really kind of tested it. And I think you could test it. Especially, I'm wondering if there's any sort of memory. So with an ant trail, obviously, if it's been being used, it's really easy to follow. But does it degrade over time? But let's say there's a food source that comes available a certain time of the year. Is it completely degraded, or do they have to find the food source all over again, or is there actually a memory of it? I don't know. So we can make a hypothesis out of it and set up an actual test, or we can make predictions about whether there's a memory or not. I'm trying to think how I would do it. I'll think about it. Oh yeah, so a lot of times straight runs down the wall of a hive indicate that the food is opposite to the direction of the sun. So they're going straight down. This is the downward waggle dance on the honeycomb. And so it's greater than 100 meters because it's a waggle dance. And then they actually show in terms of orientation, in terms of the sun. Now, what they do during a cloudy day, I'm not exactly sure. Okay. When we think about communication, we oftentimes think about honest communication. For example, there's a behavior called pronging or stoating, where usually an ungulate, like a gazelle or a deer or something like that, they start pouncing on their legs. And the question is, why do they do this? And it appears that one of the reasons is an honest signal to a predator. Don't waste your time on me. It's not deceptive, it has to be honest. You want to deter the predator from actually chasing you. And there's a lot of evidence that seems to support this interpretation of it. It might be used for other things as well, group cohesion or something, but that's an example of an honest signal, because supposedly individuals who can stoat better than others, that's giving you information about the kind of condition that they're in. So an individual who can't prong up and down very well, he's probably, maybe you don't want to give that information. And similarly with, let's say, mating and choosy females, males who are competing against each other, the whole handicap model that we've kind of discussed. I want to make sure you guys understand it. So the handicap model is a male might sport these big plumage feathers that are very colorful. And you think, okay, why would they do that? It would probably reduce their survival. First of all, they're expensive to make. And then they're more probably visually stunning to predators as well. And normally, if you look, you see that females are usually dull colored, especially if, of course, they're going to be the ones that are taking care of the nest. So the thing is, only certain males can afford that plumage. Either they have enough resources to actually make the plumage. That means you can't cheat. It's not like you can go to a paint store and paint your nice feathers, you either have the resources to do it or not. Around here we have these house sparrows that, house finches that have, the males are red on top. And that is usually an indication of diet. So if they collect more anthocyanins than other males, they'll be brighter. And in fact, really dull males, I mean orange males are obviously, it's either because there isn't a good food supply around at all, or some males are actually better at it than others. And that gives a female an indication, oh, this is a good male to mate with and raise offspring with because he's good at finding food. Okay. Now, plus there's the predation angle. If you can actually survive while being this bright and conspicuous to a predator, only those who, let's say, have better genes or in better condition can actually afford to do that. The ones that display but are not in such good condition, they're the ones that are going to get picked off. Okay, so the female, that's the idea, of course, behind it is the female uses that to actually judge a male in terms of whether she's going to mate with him or not. And it's an honest signal. You can't invade. A cheater cannot invade. That means you can't have a dull male trying to be bright, because if you can't pull it off in the first place, in other words, he's not in good enough condition or whatever, I mean, that's it. You don't have a cheater. They're impossible to cheat on a signal like that. Or if they were, then the signal should degrade in terms of the female because it's no longer carrying honest information. So in terms of mating behavior, we're dealing with honest signals again. One individual communicating to another in an honest way. But animals also use deceptive signals commonly. If you remember the octopus I showed you, well, it used actually the deceptive signal was camouflage. Okay. In this case, if we look right here, no. Okay. Actually, start with this. Okay. This is an anglerfish. Oh, come on. I want thick. Okay. Anglerfish. It's actually a female, by the way. Males are these little bitty, tiny guys that basically they're just sperm delivery devices. And we'll get into that later on. But they actually come along and embed themselves into the female, and all they do is provide sperm to the female. And they get to live, but the thing is they lose all their brain circuitry and all that in the process, so that they don't even know it. Okay, but anyway, the female, of course, uses this lure, and that's obviously, that's not an honest signal. Well, it's an honest signal in the sense that the fish thinks it's an honest signal, the prey item, but it's a deceptive signal. It's saying, here, come bite me, and then they get close enough and the anglerfish will open up its mouth and suck it in. Very effective. A lot of these anglerfish are at considerable depth, so there's very little light, and therefore a lot of them actually are bioluminescent as well. Okay. So here's a male mimic. This is a bluegill, a male. This is the female. And this is a male that's running around in drag. Now, why would a male do that? to run around and track. What's the strategy here? Anything?
Fully territorial male.
Yeah.
So, is this one of the fish that the female mimic male will copulate with the normal male, and then when the normal male's tired, copulate with the female?
Yeah, exactly. So, obviously, if another male came in, the male, territorial male would get rid of him. And if he was even a small male trying to mimic a female but the wrong color, same thing would happen. You'd be a loser. So you have these female mimics. And the males think that the mimic is another female. And the female probably thinks the same thing, except that he's a sneaker male, so when she lays eggs, he's already there, and he, fertilizes them instead of the big male. It's a sneaky strategy, and it's a common strategy in a lot of nature. Sometimes there's even another type of male. There's this bird called a ruff. It's found in Asia and Europe, and there's two color morphs of the ruff, and then there's a female, and it's like they do it on a lek. You guys know what a lek is? Okay. A lek is where certain birds display. So a lot of the famous ones are grouse. I think peacocks use a lek, where the males don't help the females at all. They come and they display to the females, and the females decide who they're going to actually mate with. So lekking behavior, and it's found, I guess you could call the bowerbirds bower kind of a lek. But normally a lek, there's lots of different males. So in the ruff, there's a dominant male of a certain morph or phenotype, and then there's a subdominant male. They look very different. The thing is, females are more likely to mate with two ruffs, each one dominant and subordinate, than they are with, let's say, just the dominant. So it actually behooves the dominant to let the subadult actually display and mate with a female as well. The question is how that actually works, and I'm not sure, because you would think, okay, the female comes in, the male dominant mates with her, and then she goes away to hell with the subdominant. But I think there's actually something going on there. In fact, it might just be attraction. Now, ruffs displaying, obviously, it's another honor signal. It has costs and benefits. And so males that display better get more females. But I just posted something on the student forum. They were looking at zebrafish, and there's this whole idea about females, how they're actually making their choices. Is it unconscious? They see a male with, let's say, brighter plumage compared to another one, they choose that one. Is that what she's using, and is that bright plumage an honest signal or not? Okay. Well, they're actually finding that this is really surprising. They thought the same thing. Zebrafinches are like the bird models of the animal world in terms of birds, and also chickens. So those are the two things that most researchers use. But in terms of behavior, it's usually zebrafinches. And it was thought that females choose on some sort of physiological basis, whether it's plumage or whatever. But they actually found out that they choose because the female finds a certain male attractive. It has nothing really to do necessarily with the plumage. In fact, it looks like love. It really does. It's a new result, and they even showed, in fact, that a male and female who pair up by choice have much higher fitness than a male and female who are put together and paired. So you would think, in terms of the model of, let's say good genes, that the female would be choosing a certain male based on good genes or, let's say, genetic compatibility. But it doesn't appear to be exactly like that at all. In fact, it looks like it's an actual conscious choice. Now, maybe it's a conscious choice mediated by other signals like pheromones or whatever. But it really shows that we don't really know. I mean, if we get into the head of a zebra finch, we might just say, oh, they both find each other really attractive. And, I mean, the other one, the other male might look just as good, but for that female, he just doesn't cut it, right? Same thing with us for another female. I mean, there's beautiful women, but some guy says, well, I know, but I just like her so much, or she likes him so much. So, kind of interesting. Okay, and then this is another deception here with a firefly. Okay, now out here we don't have anybody ever see fireflies? Okay, usually on the East Coast. They're pretty amazing. They come out at dusk, light up the sky. The males, a display for the female in terms of when they, it's kind of they emit a signal. Let's say bright, bright, stop, bright, bright. And the females, though, aren't flying around. The females are actually in the grass. And the females can display as well, but what they do is they only display, of course, when a male, she says, oh, I like his display better than others, and then she displays, and he comes down and mates with her. Now, unfortunately, for the male, there is this other firefly. And it's actually a predatory firefly. And she also displays to the male as well. But when he comes in to mate with her, she eats him. Okay? So she actually emits the same display as a normal female of that species does. But unfortunately, he gets fooled. Kind of like the sirens and Odysseus, right? Homer. So you have to think about, in terms of communication, you have to think about, okay, what is this communication for? Is it actually real good information that you're trying to display, or is it fake information? We already did this one with the octopus. Okay. Okay. Now, you know that a lot of animals use, well, we've already learned with the wasps, how they orient or navigate or migrate or find food. If you look at these birds up here, in terms of migration, so in this case, of course, the bird is orienting dependent on the angle of the sun. And then in terms of a flight path, if it's 45 degrees, it means they're heading south. This whole bit of navigation, of course, is initiated by external cues. Usually the time of year, the length of the day, perhaps the temperature, but not usually. Okay, if same thing under a natural sky, but if you've actually clock shifted the flight path, in other words, you've actually moved this up here, up to here, then it'll shift the bird to another direction. Now, you might also wonder, well, what does a bird do when there's no sun? Birds actually, some of them use the magnetic fields in terms of magnetic north and all that to actually orient. So you really don't need the sun to navigate by. They know this because they use pigeons and they put little magnets on their heads to screw up the field, and these birds didn't know where they were going. Also, birds use what's called polarized light that changes during different times of the year to navigate. And then, of course, a lot of birds actually migrate during nighttime, and they actually use the stars to actually navigate. Now, the ones that use the magnetic field, they have this little magnetite, I forget, it's up in their brain somewhere, or near their eyes. It turns out we have the same thing. There's also magnetite in us. The question is, how come we can't determine magnetic fields? Or maybe we can, we just don't know it. But I would say probably not, because there's a lot of people who, you put them out and they go in circles. They have no sense of direction at all, and other people are pretty good at it. Okay, oops. And then here's the magnet bit. And flying at night and navigating that way. I'm not sure what monarch butterflies do when they're migrating from the United States, North America down into Mexico. It's hard to say. I think they've worked it out.
I think it's temperature.
What?
I think by temperature or something, because they're trying to. I know when they go to Mexico, it's winter, and then they hibernate.
Well, that's what
for a while.
starts them off on their.
Yeah.
But how do they actually know where to go?
Yeah.
That's the question. So, but they use probably one of a visual cue, or perhaps night sky. It's hard to say. I forget what it is. And I think a lot of them actually migrate at night as well. And then finally, of course, bats. And they use echolocation. We're going to get into this more later, because it's really, people have done some really interesting work lately. There's a guy named Corcoran, and first of all, he's the one who demonstrated that moths actually jam bat signals. Before that, it was shown that with the echolocation, moths can detect that, and they take evasive action when a bat is actually close. A bat's far away, they just kind of fly off and, no problem. But if it's close, coming in, they take an evasive action. It's actually, it's an automatic response that discombobulates their muscle flying pattern. So they immediately tumble in some random way. This is an example of an antagonistic interaction, predator-prey. Whether it's a cheetah and a gazelle or these guys, interestingly, the moths the bats also are in competition with each other, and they also jam each other's signals. And the moths do too. The question is, how do the bats actually overcome it? Well, stealth bats. They actually use very, very quiet echolocation signals instead of the normal echolocations. So they can come in undetected by the moths. So this is what you would say is an arms race. The moths counter a certain way, whether it's jamming or evasive action. The bat has to respond some way, or he's not going to get a meal. And so some genera or species of bats actually have changed the way they actually send the signal and the type of signal that it is. Oh, that's right, it's the end. In fact, here, I think I'll actually show you some of that.